Okay, I'm gonna actually read the thing that I said that I was gonna read because before I went on a whole rant about cigarettes being reminiscent of penises, and that's why women don't smoke back in the 1920s before Edward Bernays manipulated the whole American population to buy whatever they don't need. You know. It's called Would You Like Some Bitterness with Your Coffee? This morning I arose to see the lunar eclipse. No moon, just clouds, so I decided to start with some tea before the sun rose. Something told me to drink the hops tea I usually avoid at all costs, with my usual ginger. Bitter, musty, what you imagine a resentful old man's attic would smell like. I told myself it was good to coat my empty stomach with the stuff, like taking digestive bitters. I gave up halfway through. My mouth begged for the small breakfast I had laid out, waiting only on the sun to rise to be eaten. I delighted at the sweetness of black plums, the sharpness of white cheddar, even the sourness of raspberries, and the bland creaminess of mozzarella. Any taste was a refuge from the sea of bitter in my cup. The ginger offered a little consolation with its familiar fire, as I chugged down the rest after my meal, again thinking only of the betterment of my stomach. I then went back to my room, pondering the day. It is my grandmother's 89th birthday, a lady for various reasons I hold much contempt for. A sweet, chipper lady whose words come with a bitter aftertaste, and sometimes whose tongue is rancid altogether. I wrote about her ego trap, her suffering, my ego trap, my suffering. I attempted to make peace with her and our dynamic for the 8900th time. I vowed to pray for her and withdraw my energy from her negative spirals. I made the best peace I could with what was maybe my second, if not first, source of bitterness in life. That I was always to have my forehead held down in her doubting palm, as shuffled. Oh, sorry. As, what the hell? I wrote, I'm very messy here. In her doubting palm, let me try this again. Okay. I made the best peace I could with what was maybe my second, if not my first, source of bitterness in life. That I was always to have my forehead held down in her doubting palm as I pushed my knees and shuffled my feet towards her approval, acceptance, and love. It would never come to pass. My secret journal peace offering was my best one yet. I went to sleep for an early nap once I accepted a 5 a.m. wake-up call. It was just too foreign to my body this time. I woke up to her message saying thank you for the lovely violets and the little bird on the flower arrangement you sent me. She then mentioned how she liked to watch the birds from her window, as if that fact hadn't been the foundation for every gift or every attempt to connect with her. As if that wasn't one of the few things I could render from her soul. I texted her I loved her too, and finally let myself dig back into my book. A book that moved me more than any had in years. A book where the lives of women felt fraught, dangerous, bound to combust in misery. Yesterday I read about the best and worst moment of the lovely main character's life. I felt despondent as I read, her precious life and love shine sweetly and warmly for a few mere moments before being scorned and forever scarred. Today I could not wait to rush back to her side, although her story from then on was damp with sadness. I just could not recover from the shock of her pain. I ventured with her through hatred, rage, sorrow, depression, grief, and bitter resentment. I ignored my rule for 3 chapters a day and finished the book entirely against my better judgment. In the end, she confessed her silenced pain. She looked dead on at the men who killed her hope and let her memory die, and bid goodbye to her only son, the last connection to her life's past warmth and future legacy. And yet, her bitterness, her, bucket. And yet she found love again. She learned to swim and find joy in the water. She found friendship and built kinship out of abandonment and the deepest loneliness. Her bitterness ended right then and there. She forgave and let go of the highest of crimes. I cried as if I had known her when I closed the book. Back in my world, I took a shower to lighten my spirit. I couldn't take the intensity of this lovely woman's life to the grocery store with me. I too needed to find joy in water to return to life again. I messaged my roommates that I'd leave at 3, since we had discussed going to the grocery today, but not when. Leaving my shower, I noticed the pile up of dirty pots someone else had left days ago. Each day I looked to the dishes to get my fix of irritability. I get to feel indignant as I wash my pots immediately, and then someone else gets away with murder. Numerous pots crusting at the sink. I greet them every morning, grateful for their permission to frown and cast down my eyes, and serve as a nice substitute to the resentments eating away at me for years. I check my phone before leaving. It is almost the time I said I'd leave for the grocery. No response. For some reason, this irks me. I start bickering in my head and imagine the fallout of my roommate demanding to be carted to the grocery store. I hear a voice to enjoy the solitude. I had forgotten I didn't actually want anyone to go with me. I breathe and revel in the relief of solitude. And then the handy attack dog of my mind pledges to bite anyone who attempts to ruin this newfound solitude. I scurry out the door to avoid any such scene, returning to my natural state of breath holding. On the way to the grocery store, I ponder bitterness and resentment and how I seem to fit it like a glove. I imagine the resentment burrowing and fermenting in my stomach and womb, hence all the pain I suffer in these parts. It makes logical sense. Digestive bitters working by finding the bile of the bitterness in the belly, making it feel seen and thus casting it out of the shadows. I imagine my womb is poisonous and barren by now, not fit for human life, only the breeding ground for my loathing projects. Meditations, spiritual guidance, internal bullshit lie detector, recognizing my own harm and flaws, rebuking my victim mindset were all major advancements in the journey from my suffering. Yet I am still on the same daily fast track to bitterness and resentment. I do all I can do to be neutral or even loving and kind at the start of each day. And somewhere, hours later, I find myself in the arms of my old lover, resentment, covered in bitterness. At the grocery store, my being has no room for that bitterness nonsense, and it is consumed with the chaos and frenzy of a cat and mouse hunt, where I'm on a hunt and I can't tell if I'm the cat or the mouse. I get in and out in less than 20 minutes, and what I get is what I get, especially without a list in tow. I came home with a variety of produce, salty fish, and basic needs, dense bread and cookies. It was not late enough to eat my dinner, which must be eaten not long or before or after sunset. To pass the short bit of time and really pass my restlessness, sitting there waiting, I make a second attempt at the original recipe, granola bars I made too dry the day before. Making the decisions as I go, I run into 5:42 by the time they're in the oven. Sunset. And it's time for dinner. I cut up some Belgian endives that had caught my eye because I had never had them, and I am always hungry for foods that may have been that of my ancestors. I figured at least some of my ancestors were likely around or in an area with endives, so why not? Whatever. Cutting them in the air, no time for a cutting board, breath held, heat rising to my face, pelvic clenched, I think about one of the effortlessly beautiful characters of my book, and how differently I feel from her in the moment. I think about how I resolved to stop stressing and breath holding while I work, to stop my face from flushing angrily. I wish I was the glowing woman in the book, even while in a rush, even cutting endives in the air. I don't stop holding my breath. I've already started, and I'm almost done, I tell myself. Heard that one before. I add nice, fresh, herby dressing, grab some smoked, salty trout, and 2 pieces of seedy, dark, dense European bread, with 2 thick slabs of butter, and a crank of even more salt. I sit down to eat, starting with the endives, which I prepared like a lettuce salad. My mistake. The bitterness is so foul, it's almost inedible, putrid. The bulbs look so crisp, fresh, and unassuming. I manage to eat almost every bite, breaking the bitterness with bread and fatty fish. I think of adding spoonfuls of sugar to cut the bitterness, or trying to fix it, but decide I'm meant to face the bitterness head on. I smile as I think to myself, God wants me to metabolize and digest bitterness today. God wants me to taste it and finally realize I don't like the taste of bitterness at all. Today is a meditation on bitterness, and I begin writing this story in my head, wanting to tell others of my chance encounter with the deity of resentment. I never have such strong intuitive decisions and messages so loud and clear, nor this many in a day. I wish to tell others so that they may taste their bitterness too. I think of the bitter woman trope and how no one loves her. I think of the shame and denial we coat as sugar around our bitterness to soften the blow, to hide it from the world, so that we can keep our resentments on a tightly running schedule, so we never have to give them up and face the real pain of our lives. I crave some juice. The only one I thought to buy was limeade. A bitter thing turned sweet. I went to open the bottle, and giving too much a squeeze, it spilled out as I opened it, dripping down to the floor and wetting parts of my socks. A bitter thing turned sweet, turned bitter again. God was not done speaking. The lecture on bitterness had not come to an end, or it was my turn to participate in the discussion, to spill out all the ways I had been a sweet thing made bitter. I didn't need to make a list. They came flying out like limeade in no sensible order. I was bitter that who I thought was a friend in the 5th grade turned my best friend against me. I was bitter I dropped out of college when I learned of the ways these institutions hoard wealth and hold us hostage, that I found little sustainable prosperity without their credential, and now I was behind my peers and my juniors after a winding valley of trial and error in finding work that appeased my soul. I was bitter that instead of focusing on creativity in a life I enjoyed, I felt I had to earn my place in the world by fixing the worldly problems that seemed to haunt my every joy. I was bitter I was not the effortlessly glowing, effeminate character from the book, and though my beauty was recognized, it did not ooze easily. I was bitter that shame and smallness collapsed my soul's flame, that I could hardly light a corner of a room. I was bitter that I was bitter, and I felt resentful of God for making me that way. Destined to be the unlovable bitter woman, my mouth foul with sarcasm, cloaking long, soured wounds, while my heart's contents were shed away to spoil, and spread like mold, the sickness that is love unexpressed.